No one expected a rumor this serious to explode overnight, but that's exactly what happened. One minute, everything was quiet, and the next, the internet was flooded with shocking claims linking Tamar Braxton and Todd Tucker to something far deeper than ordinary celebrity drama. This wasn't about shade or messy relationships. This was about a life-altering allegation that spread like wildfire before anyone could stop it. Fans were confused, blogs were scrambling, and social media turned into chaos as people tried to figure out what was real and what wasn't. Then came the moment that made everything even more intense. Todd appeared emotional, shaken in a way we rarely see from public figures, while Tamar stepped forward with a response that didn't fully confirm or deny the storm around her. Instead, she said just enough to make people question everything. Now the internet is divided, searching for answers, replaying clips, and reading between every line. Because this story doesn't feel simple. It feels layered, complicated, and far from over. The story didn't begin with clarity. It didn't start with a verified report, a press release, or even a credible insider. Instead, it surfaced the way many modern controversies do, quietly and almost invisibly, through a single post that looked convincing enough to grab attention, but questionable enough to raise eyebrows. There was no solid evidence attached, no official confirmation, just a statement presented as if it were fact. And yet, within minutes, that was all it took. Screenshots started circulating, captions became more dramatic with each repost, and suddenly Tamar Braxton and Todd Tucker were at the center of a narrative neither of them appeared prepared for. At first, people hesitated. Some users questioned the authenticity of the claim, pointing out inconsistencies and asking where the information came from. But hesitation doesn't last long on the internet. Curiosity quickly turns into engagement, and engagement turns into momentum. Before long, blogs began picking up the story, each one adding their own spin, their own tone, their own assumptions. The language became more intense, more emotional, more definitive, even though nothing had actually been confirmed. That's how the shift happened. What started as a rumor slowly transformed into something that felt real simply because so many people were talking about it. What made this situation especially volatile was the nature of the allegation itself. This wasn't a typical celebrity headline about arguments or romantic drama. This was something deeply personal, something that touches on health, trust, and reputation in a way that doesn't fade easily. Even without proof, the weight of the accusation alone was enough to spark strong reactions. Some people immediately defended Tamar, insisting that she was being targeted unfairly, possibly by someone with an agenda. Others turned their attention to Todd, questioning his silence in the early hours and wondering why he hadn't addressed it immediately. As the conversation grew louder, the timeline became harder to track. People were sharing edited clips, partial quotes, and out-of-context statements, trying to piece together a story that didn't have a clear beginning. Some claimed the rumor came from a misinterpreted live stream, others believed it was a completely fabricated screenshot designed to look authentic. There were even theories suggesting that someone deliberately planted the story to create chaos, knowing how quickly something like this could spread. But despite all the speculation, one thing remained consistent. No one could point to a verified source. Still, that didn't slow anything down. In fact, the lack of clarity seemed to make things worse. Without a definitive answer, people began filling in the gaps themselves. Old interviews were revisited, past interactions were reanalyzed, and previous tensions within the industry were suddenly being brought back into focus. Tamar's history of speaking openly about her personal struggles became part of the conversation, not in a supportive way, but as something people tried to use as context for the rumor. At the same time, Todd's public image as a family man and businessman was being questioned, not based on facts, but on association. Then came the emotional turning point. Todd appeared publicly, and instead of delivering a polished, controlled response, he seemed genuinely affected. His tone, his expression, everything about that moment felt raw. He didn't approach it like a typical celebrity addressing gossip. There was no immediate denial filled with rehearsed language, no attempt to flip the narrative aggressively. Instead, what people saw was someone who appeared overwhelmed, someone trying to process how his name had been tied to something so serious without warning. That reaction shifted the energy of the entire situation. It made people pause, even if just for a moment, and reconsider the impact of what was being said. At the same time, it raised new questions. Some viewers interpreted his reaction as proof that the rumor had hit a nerve, that it had crossed a line. Others, however, began to read into it differently, wondering if his emotional state suggested there was more beneath the surface. And that's the complicated reality of public perception. The same moment can be interpreted in completely opposite ways depending on what someone already believes. In a situation driven by speculation, every reaction becomes part of the narrative, whether it's fair or not. As Todd's response circulated, attention quickly shifted back to Tamar. People wanted to know how she would handle it. Would she ignore it and let the rumor fade, or would she confront it directly? When she finally spoke, her response didn't follow the script many expected. Instead of delivering a simple denial or dismissing the rumor entirely, she addressed the situation in a way that felt layered and emotional. She pushed back against the idea of blindly believing everything online, suggesting that not everything being said was true, but she stopped short of breaking everything down in detail. That choice became a turning point. For some, it was a clear sign that she was frustrated and refusing to entertain something she believed was beneath her. For others, it created even more suspicion. The absence of a direct, detailed denial left space for interpretation, and in a situation like this, interpretation often leads to more speculation. People began analyzing her words, her tone, even the timing of her response, trying to find hidden meaning in every detail. It became less about what she said and more about what people thought she meant. As the days passed, the story continued to evolve, not because of new confirmed information, but because of the way people kept engaging with it. Social media thrives on momentum, and this story had all the elements needed to sustain it. It was emotional, controversial, and unresolved. Every new comment, every reaction video, every repost added another layer, making it harder for the situation to settle. Even those who tried to approach it rationally found themselves pulled into the conversation, if only to question what was happening. Behind all of this, there was a deeper issue beginning to surface. The way information spreads, the speed at which narratives form, and the impact that can have on real people. Tamar and Todd were no longer just individuals in this story. They had become symbols within a larger conversation about truth, perception, and the power of the internet. And while the public debated, speculated, and reacted, the reality remained uncertain. No confirmed facts, no clear origin, just a story that continued to grow because people couldn't look away. And that's where things stood. Not resolved, not clarified, just building. The tension was still there, the questions still unanswered, and the sense that something bigger might be underneath it all continued to linger. As the conversation intensified, the story took on a life of its own, evolving far beyond the original rumor into something much more complex and emotionally charged. What had started as a single unverified claim was now being dissected from every angle, with people online building entire narratives around fragments of information. And the more those narratives spread, the harder it became to separate speculation from reality. Every reaction, every post, every silence began to carry meaning, whether intended or not. Tamar's response, in particular, became the center of attention. People replayed her words over and over, analyzing not just what she said, but how she said it. Her tone, described by many as controlled but emotional, sparked debate across platforms. Some felt she was standing her ground, refusing to dignify a harmful rumor with a full explanation. Others believed she was hinting at something deeper, something that couldn't be easily addressed in a single statement. That one line about not carrying secrets that weren't hers echoed loudly, leaving people wondering what exactly she meant. The ambiguity kept the story alive. Instead of closing the door, it opened several new ones. Suddenly, people weren't just asking whether the rumor was true or false. They were asking who might be behind it. Theories began circulating almost immediately. Some believed this was a targeted attack, possibly from someone within the industry, who had a personal or professional issue with either Tamar or Todd. Others suggested it could have been a blogger chasing attention, creating a shocking claim knowing it would go viral regardless of its accuracy. Then there were those who thought the situation might be connected to older tensions, ones that had never fully been resolved. Tamar's history of public disagreements and industry conflicts was brought back into the spotlight, not necessarily as proof of anything, but as context people used to build their own interpretations. Todd, too, found his past moments being re-examined, his public persona placed under a microscope in a way that felt sudden and intense. It was as if the internet had collectively decided to revisit everything, searching for clues that might explain the present. At the same time, Todd's emotional appearance continued to circulate, gaining even more attention than before. The clip was shared repeatedly, often with captions that framed it in different ways depending on the perspective of the person posting it. Some described it as the reaction of a man blindsided by a cruel and baseless rumor. Others questioned whether his emotions pointed to something more complicated. The reality was that no one outside of the situation could truly know what he was feeling, but that didn't stop people from trying to interpret it. What made his reaction so impactful was its authenticity. It didn't feel rehearsed or carefully constructed. It felt immediate, almost raw, and that kind of vulnerability tends to resonate with people. For many viewers, it shifted the focus from the rumor itself to the human impact behind it. It became less about the allegation, and more about what it means to have your name associated with something so serious in such a public way. That shift didn't end the speculation, but it did add another layer to the conversation. Meanwhile, Tamar's presence online remained steady but controlled. She didn't disappear, but she also didn't overshare. Each time she addressed the situation, it was measured, intentional, and just vague enough to avoid giving the rumor more direct fuel. That approach seemed deliberate, but it also left space for continued curiosity. People began to wonder if she was protecting herself, protecting someone else, or simply choosing not to engage with something she believed didn't deserve her full attention. As both of them navigated the situation in their own ways, the internet continued to react at full speed. Reaction videos multiplied, each one offering a different perspective, a different theory, a different interpretation of the same limited information. Some creators approached the topic cautiously, reminding viewers that nothing had been confirmed. Others leaned into the drama, presenting speculation as if it were closer to fact, which only added to the confusion. And then came the possibility that raised even more concern. The idea that someone might try to produce proof, whether real or fabricated, to support the rumor. In an age where editing tools are advanced and easily accessible, the line between real and fake content has become increasingly blurred. The thought that a manipulated clip or altered screenshot could surface at any moment added tension to an already unstable situation. Because once something like that is released, even if it's later proven false, the damage can be difficult to undo. This fear wasn't unfounded. People online had already begun questioning the authenticity of the original post, pointing out how easy it would be to create something that looks legitimate. Some users even claimed they had seen different versions of the same evidence, each one slightly altered, which only deepened the sense that the situation might have been orchestrated, or at least manipulated along the way. But without a clear source, those claims remained just as unverified as the rumor itself. At this point, the story had moved beyond its original form entirely. It was no longer just about what may or may not have happened. It had become a case study in how quickly information spreads, how narratives are built, and how difficult it is to regain control once something goes viral. Tamar and Todd were both navigating a situation where every move, every word, and even every moment of silence was being watched and interpreted by millions of people. The pressure of that kind of attention is difficult to measure. It doesn't just exist in public comments or trending topics. It seeps into personal spaces, affects relationships, and creates a level of stress that most people never have to experience. And yet, from the outside, it often gets reduced to entertainment, something to watch, discuss, and move on from. That disconnect between perception and reality is part of what makes situations like this so complicated. As the days continued to pass, one thing became increasingly clear. The longer the story remained unresolved, the more room there was for speculation to grow. People wanted answers, but answers weren't coming in a way that satisfied everyone. Instead, there were fragments, hints, and reactions, each one adding to the overall picture without fully completing it. And that's where the tension really began to build. Because when a story reaches this level of attention, without a clear resolution, it doesn't simply fade away. It lingers, evolves, and sometimes resurfaces in even bigger ways. Right now, everything feels like it's sitting on the edge, waiting for something to push it in one direction or another. Whether that push comes from a direct statement, new information, or something entirely unexpected remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. This situation is far from over, and the next development could change everything. As the situation reached its peak, the tone of the conversation began to shift once again, moving away from pure speculation and into something heavier, something more reflective. The noise was still there, the opinions, the theories, the constant back and forth, but underneath all of that, there was a growing awareness that this wasn't just another viral moment that would disappear without consequences. This had already gone too far, and both Tamar and Todd were now dealing with the kind of fallout that lingers long after the headlines fade. For Todd, the impact felt immediate and deeply personal. His emotional response had already gone viral, and while some people sympathized with him, others continued to question it, pulling it apart frame by frame, word by word. That's the reality of being in the public eye. Even vulnerability becomes content. Even pain becomes something people analyze instead of simply acknowledging. And as his name continued to circulate alongside a rumor he had not confirmed, the weight of that association grew heavier. It wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about protecting his identity, his family, and everything he had built over the years. Because moments like this don't stay contained online. They follow you into real life. They affect how people look at you, how they speak about you, how they interact with you behind closed doors. Even if the rumor is eventually proven false, the memory of it doesn't disappear completely. That's the part people don't always consider when they share, comment, or react. The internet moves on quickly, but the people involved don't always get that same luxury. Tamar, on the other hand, seemed to approach the aftermath differently, but that didn't mean she was unaffected. Her decision to speak carefully, to avoid over-explaining, suggested a level of awareness about how easily things can be twisted once they're out in the open. But that restraint came with its own consequences. The more measured her responses were, the more people tried to read between the lines, searching for hidden meaning in every word. And in doing so, they kept the story alive, even as she appeared to be trying to rise above it. There was also an emotional undercurrent to her presence that people couldn't ignore. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was there, in the tone of her messages, in the way she addressed the situation without diving fully into it. Some interpreted that as strength, a refusal to let the rumor control her narrative. Others saw it as a sign that there was more she wasn't saying, something she either couldn't or wouldn't reveal. And once again, the lack of clarity became part of the story itself. As both of them continued navigating the situation, the conversation online began to widen. It wasn't just about Tamar and Todd anymore. It became a broader discussion about how dangerous certain types of rumors can be, especially when they involve sensitive topics. People started questioning the role of blogs, the responsibility of content creators, and the way audiences engage with unverified information. For a moment, the focus shifted from the individuals involved to the system that allowed something like this to spread so quickly. But even that shift didn't fully calm things down. Because while some people were reflecting, others were still searching for answers, still digging, still hoping for a definitive moment that would confirm or deny everything. And in that environment, the possibility of new information, whether real or fabricated, remained a constant threat. The idea that someone could release a piece of evidence at any moment kept the tension high. Because once something new enters the conversation, it doesn't matter how accurate it is at first. It matters how quickly people believe it. Behind the scenes, the pressure must have been building. Situations like this often involve more than what's visible to the public. There are conversations happening privately, decisions being made about how to respond, how much to say, and when to say it. There's the consideration of legal implications, personal boundaries, and the potential impact on everyone connected to the situation. And while the public waits for clarity, those internal decisions can take time, especially when the stakes are this high. There were also whispers, unconfirmed and circulating quietly, that suggested both Tamar and Todd might be considering their next steps carefully, possibly even weighing whether to address the situation together or separately in a more formal way. Nothing concrete, nothing confirmed, but enough to keep people watching closely. Because a joint statement, if it ever came, could shift everything instantly. It could close the door on the rumor or open a completely new chapter, depending on what was said. At the same time, the longer the silence stretched without a clear resolution, the more the story settled into a kind of uneasy limbo. It wasn't escalating in the same explosive way it had at the beginning, but it wasn't fading either. It was lingering, sitting in that space where people haven't fully let go, but don't have anything new to react to. And that kind of tension can be just as powerful as the initial chaos, because it leaves room for the story to resurface at any moment. What made this situation stand out wasn't just the rumor itself, but what it revealed about the environment in which it spread. It showed how quickly something unverified can gain traction, how easily narratives can form without solid evidence, and how difficult it is to regain control once that process begins. It also highlighted the emotional toll that comes with being at the center of that kind of storm, something that often gets overlooked in the rush to react. As things stand now, there is still no confirmed truth, no definitive answer that ties everything together neatly. What remains are the reactions, the statements, the emotions, and the questions that continue to linger. And sometimes, that uncertainty becomes the story. Not what happened, but the fact that no one seems to fully know. The next move, whatever it may be, will matter. Whether it's a direct clarification, a deeper revelation, or simply time allowing the situation to fade, it will shape how this moment is remembered. Because right now, it exists in a space between rumor and reality, where perception often carries more weight than proof. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all. Not just what was said, but how quickly it was believed, how deeply it was felt, and how difficult it has been to separate truth from noise. Now, after everything you've just heard, it's time to really think about what's going on here. Because this situation isn't just about Tamar Braxton or Todd Tucker anymore. It's about how fast a rumor can turn into a full-blown narrative without real proof. So I want to hear from you. Do you believe this was all a dangerous lie that spiraled out of control? Or do you think there's a deeper story that hasn't been fully revealed yet? And what about those emotional reactions? Did Todd seem like someone hurt by false accusations? Or did his response raise more questions for you? And Tamar's words, were they a clear defense? Or did they hint at something bigger behind the scenes? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments, because this conversation matters more than ever. Just remember to keep it respectful, because real people are involved. If you made it this far, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Because if new receipts, statements, or unexpected twists come out, you already know we'll be right here breaking it all down with you.